Let's talk about the botting problem. Obviously, the biggest perception of botting in the game is of a negative point of view, but I kind of want to take a look at the positives of botting in the game. Now, obviously, as a disclaimer, I don't support botting, and I think players that do it, they probably make some money from doing it, and I respect anyone's choices to make an income. Respect the hustle, so to speak. However, there are some positive aspects to botting that I think a lot of people do not talk about. So the first thing that comes to mind is the economical benefits of botting. So there's certain content in the game that I think most players can agree are very tedious and can kind of be seen as grunt work, right? So you have fishing is a good example. Most players aren't really wanting to spend too much time fishing for things like sharks and manta rays, things that are essential for higher end combat in the game. People typically don't want to grind for. And so what does a player do that doesn't want to grind for these things? Well, they go to the Grand Exchange and they purchase them. And so when they purchase these items, certainly it benefits them when they don't have to spend as much GP. And so what botting does to the game is it allows these essential items, right? Sharks, certain potions, and really mundane things that are annoying to obtain but are essential for any high-level combat task like bossing or raids. And so if you look at the price of sharks and certain potions, you'll notice that when Jagex has a ban wave for these bots, typically the price starts to rise up. And this is just, kind of a sneak peek of what can happen when bots aren't fueling the game with these essential items. And the argument for this could be, okay, well, if bots weren't doing this, then the regular player would be able to make some profit by doing these skills like fishing. And that is true. However, I venture to guess that most people would rather be having fun in the game than doing the tedious fishing grinds. You might have your occasional 9-to-5er that just grinds the game AFK and wants to make profit from that. But I would say most players that are actually playing the game for fun are looking to do high-level content, which is going to require these items. And so, say Bill wants to go do a raid. Well, he's got to stock up on sharks, and when sharks are dirt cheap, he now has more money to spend on other things. And he also increases profit per hour on these high-level combat tasks. Ultimately, I think economically, this is a good thing for the game as far as high-level accounts go. The skillers and the low-level combat players, obviously, they don't benefit because now, the tasks they can do are hindered by that. But for a high-level player, these bots are definitely a benefit to them. Another benefit to botting is the player count. And so, if you go to the old school homepage, you'll see typically the game is averaging a good 100,000 plus players. Now, if you were to ban all of these bots, let's say, I'm not sure how many players would be left, but I think we can all agree that the number of players that we see that are actively playing, probably a very large percentage of those are bots. And really, you don't have to argue too hard to say that a higher player count is a great thing for a game. When a new player comes onto this RuneScape website and they say, 100,000 players playing, and maybe they go on Google to find a new MMO, and they find, oh, the top played MMOs are XYZ, and RuneScape's up there, partially because of the higher player count from the bots. And so I think this is obviously most beneficial to jagex, because when their player counts are high, it's very easy for them to go and convince, say, somebody who's a stockholder of the company that, hey, our player base is rising, and that kind of goes into my next point, right, of the bonds that are being purchased by these bots. When you have 100,000 plus players, and many of these are bots, and many of these are purchasing bonds to fuel their botting endeavors, jagex definitely benefits from this. A lot of people don't consider that in order to develop content for the game, jagex needs some money, right? Devs are not very cheap, and having this extra income, arguably a very large portion of their income coming from these bots buying the bonds, it allows the real players to benefit by having better updates. It's a lot easier to hire new devs and sink a lot of money into something when you have plenty of money coming out of it. And that's not a hot take at all. I think most people are aware that jagex is benefiting monetarily from these bots. And I think there's some arguments to be made that there's some ethical decisions here, right? I think if we could look at jagex and say, oh, they're looking out for the health of the game, and they want the reputation of the game to be good, and jagex does do some things to kind of off balance the bad reputation they get with the bots that are purchasing these bonds, right? They have these bot banning streams, and they definitely put a lot of effort into making us feel like they're doing something about it. But at the end of the day, when a large portion of the bonds are being purchased by these bot farms, and at the end of the day the goal is to make more money, how can you really assume that jagex really has our best interest when it comes to having the player base be a pure real player base? And another argument for why botting is good is in the livelihood of the game. I mean, there's certain content in this game that is quote unquote dead content, but because there's bots populating these portions of the game, they're actually somewhat playable. I mean, first thing that comes to mind is Last Man Standing. If you go to Last Man Standing this day and age, it's mostly bots. And so if you were to take out these bots, anyone who loves playing LMS, they're now unable to play it. I mean, there are real players that play LMS, but there's significantly a higher chance of them being able to log into the game at whatever time of day and getting into an LMS game. And that I'm not even harping on the fact that bots, especially in LMS, are actually a challenge for the player, right? I mean, you go against a bot in an LMS game, unless you're a good PKer, these bots are no slouches. They kind of predict what you're going to do based off your weapon switches. Obviously, being a bot, you can kind of predict how it plays, and so a lot of players have kind of figured it out and have ways around killing the bots. But LMS is just one example. I mean, you can go into the wilderness too, right? A lot of the wilderness bosses and Revenant caves, for instance, are littered with bots. There's a good portion of the population that enjoys the aspect of just being able to kill bots in the wilderness. It's a free 2 mil GP. They don't have to worry about them fighting back too much. It can be a fun activity just killing these bots. And it's not to say that these are good reasons to not get rid of the bots. I think that overall, if I had a choice, I think I would say, yeah, get rid of the bots. But I think these these reasons are reasons to consider that maybe it's not necessarily all the bots that are the problem, but rather specific bots. Really, the big issues with bots are in the high-level content of the game, right? You got bots that do the Infernal Cape, for instance, which kind of devalues the achievement of getting the cape. And then, you got bots that do high-level PVM content. So, like, I already know there's bots out there doing the Coliseum like it's nothing. There's bots out there doing raids. There's bots out there doing, high-level boss content. And so, kind of going back to the topic I mentioned earlier of the economical benefits, this part of botting is really an all-around negative part of botting, because when you affect the economy of the high-level players, now it's all bad. I mean, what does a player have left to do if not high-level content that has a chance of generating these 100 million GP plus items? Bots are covering that and are flooding the market with those items. Now you, as a high-level player, have no option. It's covering all the bases. So if I had a say in it, I think I would tell Jagex, hey, stop wasting your time on these low-level wilderness bots and fishing bots. Focus your time on the Theater of Blood bots, the Coliseum bots, ones that are directly impacting the die-hard population of the game, which is typically the high-level content players.